Prologue. In the quiet between heartbeats. The night it happened wasn't meant to be anything extraordinary. The sky was its usual ink-black canvas. The wind drifted lazily through the city, unsure if it should bother stirring the leaves. And Ava Torres was exactly where she always was, inside the back of an ambulance, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin, yet still managing to offer a patient a steady, gentle smile. Some nights, she felt as if her heart beat more for others than for herself. And tonight, that heartbeat was running too fast. The radio crackled with an emergency call, sharp and urgent, and Ava was already outside before the dispatcher finished speaking. The injured man lay on the pavement, breathing shallowly, eyes unfocused. Blood warmed Ava's gloves as she pressed onto the wound. Her motions practiced, precise. For a moment everything else blurred. She looked into his fading eyes and whispered the same promise she once gave someone she lost years ago. "You're not alone. I'm right here." A promise she had failed to keep in the past. A memory she carried like a quiet scar beneath her ribs. Then something caught her eye. Something slicing across the sky. A streak of white-blue light tore through the clouds. Too bright, too deliberate, too impossibly beautiful to be a simple meteor. It carved a glowing wound across the heavens. And the explosion that followed shook the night like a giant exhaling its last breath. And then, everything stopped. The street lights froze mid-flicker. Floating shards of glass hung motionless in the air like stars unsure of their place. The wail of a siren fell silent in half a breath. The entire city held itself still, caught between before and after. 1 second, 1 second, one suspended heartbeat, and the world refused to move beyond it. Ava blinked. She could still move. She could still feel the thrum of her pulse, the sting of cold air, the tremor of fear slipping into her lungs. The world had frozen, yet left her outside its grasp, as if time had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. In the quiet between heartbeats, she thought, something has changed. She stood slowly, surrounded by a city sculpted into stillness. Every detail was impossibly sharp. A dog mid-leap, a coffee cup caught mid-fall, a woman's hair suspended in the air like drifting silk. Photograph. A memory still warm from the moment it was taken. And in that vast and suffocating silence, she heard it. Measured. Like footsteps pressing into fresh snow. Someone was moving. Someone else existed inside this unmoving second. A chill traced her spine, delicate as a whispered warning. The footsteps grew clearer, closer. And Ava realized she wasn't alone in this breathless world. Some seconds change everything. She had just stepped into one, a second that would not let her go. Chapter 1. The second that stopped. Night shifts had a way of blurring into one another, thin lines of sleepless hours stitched together by sirens, streetlights, and the small, stubborn beat of human hope that pulsed through every call Ava Torres answered. Tonight felt no different. The city gleamed in smudged reflections on wet asphalt, still glistening from the short rain that had passed an hour earlier. Neon signs flickered lazily in the darkness. A convenience store hummed quietly beneath its faulty fluorescent bulb. Air spilled from alleyways in pockets of cool and warm currents that seemed indecisive about the season. Ava sat in the back of the ambulance, adjusting equipment with her usual precision. Her hands moved automatically, checking oxygen tanks, res-tacking gauze, lining syringes, double-clicking each latch on the trauma kit. But beneath her careful motions, fatigue clung to her like a second shadow. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was the kind of tiredness that lived in bone. And memory. And memory never truly slept. Her partner had stepped out minutes earlier to grab coffee, leaving the back doors open just a crack. A breath of night slipped in, cool and metallic, brushing along Ava's skin. She exhaled slowly. Another quiet night, he'd said. Ava had learned not to trust quiet nights. They broke the loudest. The radio cracked like a match striking the dark. Unit 7, respond to RTC near the Riverbend overpass. Injuries reported. Possible entrapment. Ava snapped into motion before the dispatcher finished speaking. Her boots hit the ground. Her gloves slipped on with a practice tug. By the time the ambulance roared to life, she was already tightening her seatbelt and steadying the trembling in her fingers. The adrenaline that always came fast, sharp and familiar. The accident scene was only minutes away. A sedan had collided with a metal pole. The front end crumpled inward like a crushed can. Headlights shone crookedly into the street, slicing pale beams through the dark. Shattered glass glittered across the pavement like broken stars. A man staggered beside the wreckage. Blood pooled in the hollow of his collarbone. Ava reached him before he hit the ground. "I've got you," she breathed, bracing his weight against her shoulder. "Stay with me. You're going to be all right." Her voice was firm, but inside her pulse rattled. The man's breath came in ragged bursts. His hands trembled against her jacket. I didn't see," he murmured, but the words slipped away, lost to pain. "That's all right. Don't talk." Ava eased him down, fingers already assessing, checking for fractures, applying pressure to a bleeding wound along his ribcage. Her movements were gentle but swift, guided by years of training, and haunted by a single memory she still carried like a secret burn beneath her ribs. A promise she had once made. A promise she had once broken. She swallowed hard and focused on the man's pulse beneath her fingertips. Strong. Rapid. Live. A faint tremor rippled through the air. Ava paused. At first she thought it was the rumble of distant construction, or the railway bridge echoing from across the city. But then the wind shifted, sharp and electric, as if the sky itself had inhaled too deeply. She lifted her head. And saw it. A streak of radiant blue-white light carved through the night, tearing a wound in the sky. Not falling. Not drifting. But cutting. Slicing. Moving with an intelligence that felt both alien and ancient. The man on the ground stopped breathing, not from death but from awe. Ava felt her own breath snatch in her throat. Then the explosion hit. A sound too deep to be called noise. A rippling shock that thundered through the air, shaking windows, rattling street lamps, sending a pulse through the concrete itself. Ava threw herself over the man, not thinking, only acting. Body instinct responding to disaster. And then, the world ended. Or at least it stopped pretending to move. Silence swept over the street in one clean stroke. Not silence as in quiet, but silence as in erasure. Sound vanished. The trembling stopped mid-shiver. The lights froze mid-flicker. Ava slowly lifted her head. Everything had stopped. A paper cup hung suspended above the sidewalk, droplets of coffee floating in the air like sepia-colored pearls. A bicycle hovered mid-fall, wheels still, its shadow cast at an impossible angle. The blinking red hand on the crosswalk signal had frozen mid-blink. Even the dust motes in the air were unmoving. Ava's breath grew loud in her chest. Too loud. So loud it felt intrusive. "Hello." Her voice cracked against the dead air. No reply. Not even an echo. The city had become a photograph in 3 dimensions. Sharp, eerie, still. The man she had been treating was frozen too, eyes half-lidded, mouth parted as if holding a breath that would never leave his lungs. But Ava could still move. Her thoughts were heavy with disbelief. She touched her own pulse, fast, frantic, alive. She inhaled, cold air stung her throat. She exhaled, and her breath fogged faintly in the chilled night. The world was gone, but she remained. No. Her voice shook as she stood. This can't be. The emergency worker in her tried to find logic. Tried to analyze. Tried to reduce the impossible to something she could manage. Time didn't freeze. Not in real life. Not in physics. She must have hit her head. She must be hallucinating. She must. A soft sound broke the stillness. Ava spun around so fast her spine tensed. A step. Low. Deliberate. Crunching rhythmically. As though someone were walking on newly fallen snow. In this frozen world they sounded impossibly real. Her heart lunged into her ribs. Someone else was moving. She wasn't alone. She strained her ears. The footsteps came from farther down the street, echoing faintly between buildings. Not an animal. Not the wind. But a person. A silhouette shifted at the edge of her vision, too distant to identify, but undeniably human. Ava's breath tightened. Fear pressed against her ribs, but so did something else. Relief, sharp and disbelieving. "Hey!" she called, voice echoing strangely in the still air. "Hey, stop! Can you hear me?" The footsteps paused. The figure stilled. For one suspended moment, the world held its breath with her. Then the person turned, just slightly, and began to walk toward her, their movement sure and steady, unburdened by the frozen second around them. Ava's pulse raced as she took a hesitant step forward. She didn't know if this moving stranger would bring answers or danger. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The world had stopped. Time had fallen silent. And she and whoever this was, they were the only two hearts still beating inside a moment that refused to end. Chapter 2. The soldier who still moves. For a moment Ava couldn't breathe. Not because the air was gone, but because someone else was breathing it. The figure moving toward her cut through the frozen world like a blade of certainty, slicing through impossibility with each deliberate step. In this suspended second, everything else was an echo of motion, a shadow of the life it once held. But he was real. Life. Walking as though the ground beneath him still obeyed the laws of time. When he came close enough for the streetlight to paint his features, Ava felt her breath snag. He looked like someone carved from tension and training, broad-shouldered, steady, alert. His clothes were dark, tactical, military in a practical, unboastful way. Short dark hair tousled by the wind that once blew. A faint scar traced along his cheekbone, barely visible until the light brushed it. But his eyes, they were the thing that stunned her most. Clear, searching, unsettled. Yet filled with the unmistakable alertness of someone who had seen danger before and knew how to look it in the eye. A soldier's eyes. Her heart hammered a little harder. He slowed to a stop several feet away, hands lifted, empty, open, non-threatening. "Don't move," Ava said before she realized how absurd the command sounded in a world where nothing else could. He blinked at her, a tiny sign of life that made the air shiver with meaning. "You can talk," he said quietly. His voice was smooth but frayed at the edges, like nerves stretched too thin. "So can you." Ava's tone wobbled only a little. He studied her, taking in her uniform, her gloves stained with someone else's blood, her shaking breath. And then, "You're not stuck. You're like me." Ava hesitated. "I don't know what I am right now." The ghost of something like relief flickered over his face. He lowered his hands slightly, still cautious. "Name's Eli," he said. "Eli Donovan." Ava swallowed. "Ava Torres." Silence stretched between them, not the oppressive, crushing silence of the frozen city, but something softer, something that made the world's pause feel almost bearable. "Are you hurt?" Eli asked. She shook her head a bit too fast. "No, I was working on a patient when everything stopped." His gaze flicked to the man on the ground, then to the suspended coffee cup in midair, then the hovering bicycle. His jaw tightened. "Same here," he murmured. I was on patrol near the docks. Saw the light. The sky lit up like. He stopped, searching for words. Like something slicing straight through it. Ava exhaled shakily. At least we both saw it. Doesn't make it less insane. Their eyes met. It was the first moment either of them felt less alone. Eli approached the frozen patient cautiously, kneeling down beside the man with surprising gentleness for someone who looked capable of breaking down a door with his shoulder. He's breathing, Eli said softly after a moment. Barely. Slow but not stopped. Like time caught him in mid-inhale. Ava knelt beside him. Their shoulders nearly brushed. A small contact, but after the last traumatic minutes, it felt like heat in a world gone cold. Her hands hovered over the patient. I don't think anything we do changes them, she said. He won't bleed out. He won't get better. He just is. Eli nodded. Suspended. They both stood, dusting their knees. So what happened to us? He asked. Ava shook her head. If I knew, I'd tell you. One moment I was treating him, the next. Everything froze. And you didn't. Eli looked at her with a hint of wonder she wasn't prepared for. No, she said quietly. I was walking toward my unit. Then boom. He lifted his hands, palms open, as if showing her that he had no answers. I thought maybe I'd blacked out. Or the world had. Ava blinked at him. Are you suggesting we hallucinated the same impossible thing? Hallucinations don't usually come with sound barriers breaking in half. His lips quirked in a humorless half-smile. Despite herself, Ava's mouth twitched. He wasn't wrong. A cold wind, an old one from before the explosion, sighed through the city. It brushed Ava's hair, but the loose strands remained suspended, motionless in the air. She stared at them with a hollow ache filling her chest. How is this even possible? She whispered. Eli's expression softened, a flicker of empathy crossing his face. I don't know, but we should move. Standing still in a silent world doesn't seem like the best idea. Ava hesitated, glancing back at her patient. I can't leave him. Eli nodded, firm, gentle. And he won't go anywhere. We'll come back. I promise. Promise. The word stung, sharp and delicate. But something in Eli's voice made her believe him. Reluctantly, she stood. Okay. But we're not going far. Eli gave a small nod. Just enough to see if anyone else is, like us. Moving, Ava finished. Alive, Eli corrected. A strange warmth pooled beneath her ribs. They walked side by side down the halted street. Their footsteps were the only real sound left in the world, echoing off buildings like whispers through an abandoned cathedral. Every frozen detail they passed made Ava's chest tighten further. A dog frozen mid-leap, paws suspended an inch above the pavement. A man staring at his phone, fingertip hovering a millimeter above the screen. A couple locked in a half-argument pose, one's mouth open mid-word, the other's eyes narrowed in irritation that would never finish forming. Life paused, but still humming with the memory of movement. Eli scanned every rooftop, every shadow, his soldier's instincts sharp. Ava noticed the way his shoulders tightened protectively when they passed a frozen streetlight that flickered eternally between on and off. You okay? She asked quietly. He nodded, jaw flexing. Yeah, just adjusting. To what? Ava asked. He swept his gaze over the frozen world. To the fact that everything I ever learned about physics, time, and the universe is gone. Ava huffed a small, breathless laugh. I feel like we walked into a photograph. No, Eli said softly. A photograph doesn't breathe around you. Doesn't wait. This feels like the second before something terrible happens. A chill rippled down Ava's spine. You think this is dangerous? She asked. Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes tracked the suspended particles in the air, the glowing dust caught in mid-motion, the soft distortion of light. Yes, he said at last. I think whatever did this isn't done. Ava swallowed. Then we need to know more. Exactly. They continued toward the main road. Ava felt Eli studying her occasionally, not with suspicion, but with a confusion he didn't bother to hide. You're surprisingly calm, he said at one point. I'm not, she replied. Well, you're good at pretending. He shrugged. Emergency workers don't get to panic first. We panic later. After the paperwork. Eli chuckled, a low, warm sound that seemed impossibly alive in this deadened second. How about you? Ava asked. You're a soldier. You should be freaking out. I am, Eli said simply. I'm just not good at showing it. Beat of silence. You did well back there, he added. With the injured man. Watched you. You didn't freeze. Ava exhaled, her breath catching. Freezing isn't an option in my job. Or mine. Their eyes met briefly, something fragile passing between them. Two people who weren't supposed to be here. Two beats still pulsing in a world without time. They turned a corner and stopped. The intersection was a perfect tableau of halted chaos. A bus frozen inches from a pedestrian. A car pinned in a left-turn slide. A flock of birds suspended overhead, wings outstretched like shards of dark glass. Ava pressed a hand to her chest. Eli whispered, "Holy hell!" They walked around the bus, stepping carefully between suspended raindrops, tiny crystals hanging in the air like stars fallen too early. Ava reached out. Her fingertip brushed one. It didn't move, didn't melt, didn't even tremble. Just existed. Eli watched her with quiet intensity. We should keep going. If anyone else is moving, they might head toward open streets. Ava nodded, though dread twisted her gut. What if there's no one else? Then at least we found each other. The simplicity of his words hit her harder than she expected. They crossed another block before something new caught Eli's attention. Hold on, he said, stepping toward a shop window. The glass reflected the city behind them, but Ava saw his focus shift downward, to a wall of watches. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Men's watches, women's watches, vintage gold faces, digital clocks, mechanical timepieces in rows and rows. All frozen. All unmoving. All struck at 1 second. Ava felt the breath leave her lungs. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't a coincidence.